Hello and welcome again to another edition of Stay at Home and Brew It. I am Jeff Pro, and I believe Brock Torringa will be joining me here shortly. He's finishing up an order. But today we come to you to talk to you about budget brewing. Now, this is how to save money on brewing. Now, earlier we were kind of talking about this, and Michael Murphy, whom you've seen on here a few times, and you actually see in the background right now.
It can't be done.
He's a firm proponent of the idea that budget brewing does not exist.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right, Brock. It's all right. Appreciate you being here. So Michael believes you can't do it, but
Okay, just to defend myself, there are a couple ways that you can cut down on your cost of brewing, but I feel that brewing's not a cheap hobby. And if you're trying to cut too many corners, I think you're going to lessen your quality of beer. But I'm going to let you guys get into that.
Okay, great. Now that Michael's put in his 2 cents here, we can break this down just a little bit.
okay.
And that's not altogether true. I mean,
No.
it can be an expensive hobby that can take over your life, definitely, if you want it to be, depending on how far you want to go. I, there for a while, had an airplane hangar full of stuff, so it had definitely taken over my life, for sure. But it took many years to get to that point. And when it started slow, we did have a budget, and we had a small budget, and we were still able to make really good beers.
And I know, initially, as I started off too, my first thing was I thought, I'm going to get in this and I'm going to save money. And, because, I started looking at, ingredients online. I thought, holy mackerel, I can make a beer and I'm paying next to nothing for it.
Next to nothing for it,
Yeah.
yeah. That kind of reminds me, early on, one of my first brew partners, his wife actually came up, and she was very organized, and she had put in all of our ingredients, and she had showed us, she said, you see how much you can save doing this? And she had this whole spreadsheet ready for us to go, and anyway, so...
Yeah, and I've even had people come into the shop. I think Brock, you probably have too, who said, I'm getting into this, and I told my spouse or my significant other that we're going to save money. Well,
Lies, all lies.
not exactly, especially at first, because there's initial costs. But today we're wanting to start from the idea of saying, okay, you already have your brew system, you already know how to brew, but with times being kind of what they are. And money sometimes being a little tight right now, what are some things we can do to brew beers in a perhaps less expensive fashion, or to perhaps save money on brewing? In the beginning, I remember when I first started brewing, I was trying to brew all these high gravity beers and highly hopped beers, and
Well, absolutely. I mean, why would you get into brewing unless you wanted to make some crazy brew that you couldn't get on the market?
Oh, yeah.
When did you get into brewing?
I got into brewing back in, it was 2004.
Okay.
BC?
Not
That's
BC.
before Christ.
It was even the current era that I got into brewing. Although everybody here thinks I'm old, but that's all right.
Well, even back in the 90s and stuff, to get home brewing supplies was a little more difficult.
Correct.
Became a little bit more available now, and definitely with the insurgence of it, prices have come down on raw ingredients and stuff like that. So.
Correct, and it's easier to find a huge variety. I mean, we've got hundreds of different kinds of malt here, hundreds of different kinds of hops, and
Right there.
and so it's something which.
So you were saying you got in, you were brewing all these high
Correct.
gravity crazy beers.
Yeah. So first, I started brewing all these high gravity beers and highly hopped beers. I had a time where I was experimenting with hops, where, Dogfish Head was just kind of in its heyday, and just kind of coming around. And you had the 60-minute IPA and the 90-minute IPA, and
Yep.
so I decided I was going to make my own version of it. So I took 2 pounds of Amarillo hops and just chunked in hop pellets for
The whole 90 minutes.
whole 90 minutes,
Okay. Continuously hot.
continuously.
That's what the can said. We did something very similar, and
Did
that's
you?
actually was a lot of the inspiration for me to get into brewing as well.
And that was not a cheap beer.
No, absolutely not.
And then I did a Russian Imperial Stout that clocked in at about 17%.
Wow, that's
That
a
was-
high grav beer for a newbie.
And that
too.
was not cheap.
It's difficult to do.
It was.
Yeah, it's difficult to get something that high gravity. So it reminds me again of my buddy's wife, and that was her deal. Well, if we brew these types of beers, we can do this. And I said, hold on there, just slow down just a little bit. we're not really getting in this to brew as many rice lagers as we can possibly brew, just to have an immense amount of beer that we can drink. We wanted to make high quality, good beers that we wanted to drink, stuff that we couldn't find on the shelf.
And I think that's, I mean, if it really gets down to it, for a lot of us, that's what we want to be able to do. We want to produce something that we can enjoy, share with others, something that we perhaps can't find on the store shelves, or maybe even sometimes something similar but with our own little twist. Some of us get into brewing to, also to socialize, to have,
A group around you.
yeah, kind of a group around you and things like that. But, with times being what they are, I think a lot of us, may be kind of eyeing the idea of saying, okay, I want to still continue brewing interesting beers, beers that I can't find on the shelf. What are some things, or what are some things I can do to save money? Now, in our conversation with Michael earlier, and he can't defend himself now because he's back in the back working. One of the things he said was, well, you can save a little bit money in the area of yeast.
Okay, absolutely. I think this is a fantastic thing to save you a little bit of money. In fact, so I had gotten brewing with the Lutheran church that I was going to with a group of guys, and we were brewing an immense amount of beer at that time. And that was one of the things, how do we get this cost down a little bit? And I don't know if you were going where I thought you were going with this, but what we did is we were using wet yeast anyway. And at $8 a pitch, I mean, some of these high gravity beers, I mean, $16 or more to pitch for, 1 5-gallon batch of beer. So we actually started slanting our yeast, growing a big starter, and then sanitizing pint jars, labeling it, putting it in there, and then we could actually grow a starter from those. So on one pitch, and I still have a pitch of Canadian Belgian that I got in 2014.
That was a Y strain, wasn't it?
It was a YZ strain, an absolutely fantastic Belgian strain, and I've kept it alive for that long.
Wow.
And I'm still using it, so it can be done. Now we've looked at it under the microscope, and actually with very little modification or modulation in there too.
Really?
Yeah, it's still in really, really good shape, but we've taken very good care of it this entire time. But that saved us, I don't know how much money, over the course of that time. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, one of the ways you can definitely do it is to reuse your yeast. Now, in order to be able to do that,
there's a couple of different methods, actually, right?
Correct. So you would actually pitch a starter and then...
Yeah, what I like to do is I like to make a starter first and then crash it, or actually not crash it, put it into sanitized mason jars. And I like to do that so that yeast doesn't get stressed out or used once. You can do it. I know that you use a different method, and I've done that before. When I first got into it, we started washing our yeast and collecting it after the beer was already finished. But I found that I could make that yeast strain last for a lot longer if I never did a beer with it. I only ever liked it for about 3 generations and then got rid of it by washing the yeast.
Yeah, and that's actually what I end up doing. So my buddy Nick and I, a lot of times for some of our especially for our lagers, we will actually wash our yeast. And that's a process we can go into perhaps another time. But we'll wash our yeast and then reuse it. And after about the 3rd, 4th generation, we usually throw it away.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, because it starts mutating and things start changing in it.
Yeah, did you notice that you'll get a little bit of color too when your yeast is stored and stuff like that? So I'm not a microbiologist, but it has to be putting flavors and stuff in your beer that
Correct.
that you didn't have on your original pitch. Not that it would be terrible or bad, but.
And I mean, the fact of the matter was, we were able to make 3 or 4 batches of beer that tasted spectacular, and that was a lot of yeast that we saved that we would have otherwise would have had to drop quite a bit of money on buying extra yeast.
Absolutely, and for like little or no money, you don't need any extra equipment to do this either.
No.
Your route, the route that I take, you need to buy some extra things, not a whole lot. In the end, it saved us. I think overall, that's kind of what we're going to see a trend is. It's going to be initial investment for you.
Correct.
But then after that, I think you can make a beer for not very, very expensive.
You can also go the route of dry yeast. Dry yeast is a little less expensive than the liquid yeast. It actually ferments very, very well. We've talked about that a number of times on the show. You don't have quite the variety that you have within the liquid yeasts, but you still have a lot that you can do with those. So dry yeast can
absolutely.
be a good way too.
Well, and there are some fantastic dry yeast strains out there as well. In fact, we used to use only dry yeast when I first got into brewing. It was like, dry yeast, this is the way. And then we found the wet yeast and it was like, it opens up for a lot more strains for you, a lot bigger styles, a lot more things to choose from, a lot more variety. But I've actually gone back to a few of my old school dry pitches and have gotten sometimes better results.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to discourage anybody from dry yeast. Did you see the question here? I don't understand. Oh, is it cutting out?
Oh.
That's a sound thing?
Okay. Now, another thing you can do is actually brew lower gravity beers. This is a way in which you can still enjoy beer and enjoy, budget brewing. On our table, I put a few of our kits that are a little less expensive. We've got the Brazos Blonde, which is a blonde ale. That's a nice, easy drinking beer that won't put too much of a hole in your budget.
One of my favorites right here.
Yeah, we've got the Deacon Jim right here, which is one of our newer kits. That is a Belgian or Trappist style single. That's kind of a lower gravity beer. Has
Fantastic beer.
a nice Belgian character to it.
It's this guy's recipe.
It's all right. It's all right.
It's delicious.
But if you haven't tried, if you like Belgian beers, but you don't want to lose your feet after you've had two of them, this is a great one to go because it sits right around 5%.
So, and what's the price point on here?
I can't remember offhand. The Deacon Jim?
4.5?
No, the price.
Oh, that's a pretty cheap kit. Let me see. I got this.
Okay.
One of
thanks.
our more affordable kits. Right?
Correct. That's a very affordable kit. Another one is actually also the Hellas, Hellas Half Acre. That's actually an inexpensive kit too. So those are definitely some ways that you can save some money. Brew blonde ales. A lot of the British beers are a little lower gravity, bitters, an Irish red, things like
Yep,
that.
Absolutely. Ambers.
And even lower hopped beers. A lot of the German lagers are very good ones to brew. Have bases of Pilsner malt, maybe a couple of other things, and
So not only a little bit cheaper, but they're also fantastic to drink.
oh, spectacular.
36.
Okay, so the Deacon Jim is $36.
Okay.
So
And that's for the extract, which actually is a little bit more expensive than finally when you've gone all grain. So all grain, again, initially the equipment cost is going to be there for you up front, but the cost of ingredients is going to lower after that, and by about $10-15 a kit.
Correct.
Sometimes even more. Some of those kits are very low.
now, one way, and this is something I'm glad we had Brock with us today because I wanted to ask him because he knows the chemical side of things in and out pretty
Ooh,
well.
I don't know. Some stuff.
Years ago, somebody told me that whether it's Star San or Ace of San, as long as the pH of it stays within a certain range, it's still good and can be used again and again and again. Is that true?
That's absolutely true.
Okay.
Now, what you really want to be careful for, though, Jeff, is if you are using out of a bucket, you want to be careful that you're not getting too much organic inside of that bucket.
Okay.
Because we can't sanitize dirt. So anything that is going to be organic in there is not going to be a good thing that you want to be rinsing your cleaned, then sanitize. Remember, that was our two
Yes.
steps. For every sanitation, you had to clean first, then sanitize. So if we're getting a lot of organics in there, but no, absolutely. So that acid is not going to go as long as that pH is in the right level. It's
Okay.
still going to do its job.
Okay.
And you can test that with we always had a pH strip.
Yes.
Now, both companies, I think, have a recommended level for that. It's just
Remember-
it's phosphoric acid and a foaming agent that's in that.
Okay.
And I forget what that is. I just can't remember numbers.
It's okay.
It just I never will.
It's probably
So,
on the bottle.
I don't think it
or-
is on the bottle.
Oh.
I found it on the website, but it will last for a good amount of time. And we used to just drop that pH strip in there and test it, and as long as that's still in that range, it's good. And I mean, I've had a bucket of sanitizer be viable for up into, I hate to say, a month.
Actually, I have too.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great way to save a little bit of money too. Sanitizer isn't a huge expense, but I mean it can add up, especially if you're brewing quite a bit.
Yep.
It's the Ace of San is a little less expensive, a little more affordable than Star San.
Yeah, especially if if it's something, if you brew a lot, you start getting into the gallon sizes. That I think that gallon of Ace of San's what? Yeah, it's like $30 something for a gallon, which is almost the cost of a 32 ouncer in Star San. So it's quite a savings, and it's exactly the same chemical that's in there. So good cost savings.
Yeah.
No brainer for me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely a good one to use. And then the fact that you can reuse it is also something that can save you money.
Now, I don't like to tell a lot of people, just, make you a pail of Star San or Ace of San and leave it there for a good month.
No.
Especially with newer brewers. And again, you have to be very careful about not getting organics back into that bucket, because some of that silt will be in there. And also, it needs to be covered. It has to be airtight. If it's just left in a bucket with the lid off, that chemical is going to dissipate and it's not going to be any good.
Or they're going to get all kinds of critters going in, because you get some bugs and things like that.
Yep, which we do not want in our beers.
No, even if it's a sanitary bug.
I don't think the bugs are sanitary, even if they're flying there.
It was wishful thinking, perhaps.
But that's a good way. It was a good recommendation.
So there are some ways to save on expenses in brewing. Another one actually we were talking about earlier is here at Texas Brewing, as well as and maybe a few other places, but here especially, we actually offer discounts to people who are in homebrew clubs. If the homebrew club reaches out to us and lets us know, that they're around, we're happy to come up with a discount code, and you as well as your club members can actually get 10% off
Yep.
of ingredients and ingredient kits.
Yep, that's a good little savings too.
It is.
We have a few homebrew clubs that are pretty close. I know the Cap and Hair guys have been around here a lot, but there's a few others as well. I believe.
Yeah. Let's see. I think the High Plains group is.
Okay.
There's a group out east of us. I can't remember the name of them offhand.
I don't know a heck of a lot of them,
Okay.
to be honest with you. But I will say, guys, if you're out there and you hear this, please give us a call and connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to support our homebrew clubs
We do.
in any way that we possibly can. So
And for those of y'all who don't belong to a homebrew club, that can be a great way of meeting other people, socializing, and also, I mean, I've been a member of a club before, and sometimes what we do is we do a big bulk buy of some stuff, save some expenses, but bulk buys of hops or grain, and that can be a great way to share an expense or even reduce your expense of
well,
brewing.
and Jeff, that's just another good point here that you should probably tell them about whenever if you've got some brews coming up, and say I need Hallertau for several recipes that I'm going to brew, you might check into just buying yourself a pound of it. Now, it stores pretty good in the freezer.
Yes.
It'll last a good long time as long as you keep it away from the oxygen. Again, don't leave it just hanging on open or something like that, and store it in your freezer. But that pound price is going to be significantly lower than
Correct.
buying it by the ounce.
Or even buying a sack of grain. A sack of grain can be less expensive. We'd be happy to ship you, a pallet of grain if you want.
Absolutely. We have $99 flat rate pallet pricing, so
So if you want a pallet of Pilsner or a pallet of Pale,
give me a call. No, but actually, we used to do that very thing, not a pallet size, but we would buy our grain in bulk. At some point, it just made sense for us to go ahead and get ourselves a mill and mill our own grain. So we could go, and I had several base malts that we were using at that time. We had our Pilsner, we had our Pale, we used some various other things, a lot of Vienna, and those sorts of things. And I would just buy a bag of all of those base grains I used a lot. Then when I called the homebrew club or the homebrew store, all I needed to get was, my specialty malts for that order. Because, for much, much cheaper, since I had bought this sack, I could just go ahead and weigh that out, mill it at home. And that was definitely a cost savings.
Yeah.
For someone who brews a lot.
True. And I'd say along those lines is kind of a follow-up from what Brock is saying, and this kind of harkens back to our episode we did on base malts and specialty malts. If you're buying bulk grains, or even if you're looking for grains that are less expensive, like we've got some of our malts that are definitely a little bit less expensive than some of the other malts. But just because a malt is inexpensive doesn't mean it's bad, but also it doesn't mean that it's good. There's sometimes some malts out there that may not be the direction you want to go, and yet they're very inexpensive. Bob's malted barley that he sells out of his truck at Walmart might be fantastic. Then again, it might be horrible.
It might be a fantastic price.
Yeah,
But it might be horrible malt.
Exactly. So, try and also balance. You want to balance the quality of your ingredients also with cost too. Just because a malt is crazy expensive doesn't mean that it's incredibly good.
Yeah, no. It might just mean that, they had a hard crop year, that it's difficult to ship to whatever area that you're in, those sorts of things. If you're in the southern region and you can get something for real cheap, I've got a buddy in Minnesota, he just can't get it up there.
Yeah.
And it's way too expensive for him to use. It's like, this is great malt, they get it so cheap, and he's like, oh, it's so expensive, I can't get my hands on it. So kind of look for that thing too,
Yeah. So there are definite ways to save money while you're brewing and to be able to still make good quality beer. And I don't think we have any questions. I haven't seen
It's
any.
just trying to, some more methods, just saving money overall, I think is, especially, in the brew house, in a brewery, you're always looking about what you can do to kind of, wherever you can cut that cost a little bit. And I'm talking about things like, I had a really good suggestion the other day when we were talking about chillin' beers. And somebody had said that you could use the hot water that was coming off your heat transfer to come back and clean with. So overall, we're talking about that, shorting the amount of water that you had to use, so and the amount of cost there involved. If you're thinking about having a brew house or you have one, that's always a constant concern. What can I reclaim? What can I use? What can I do to save that cost down? And I think there's a lot of those things that you can do even as a home brewer.
Oh, yeah.
To bring down that cost overall.
Oh yeah, like one of the things my buddy Nick and I, when we brew, we actually use RO water, and it was getting kind of expensive going down to the water machine at the store and lugging our 5-gallon jugs and filling them. It was getting pricey. Now, an investment in an RO system was an initial outlay that was not cheap. I think it ran us about $280.
Okay.
But in the long run, we've saved quite a bit using it.
Sure.
And so sometimes to save money, unfortunately, you also have to spend some money.
Yeah, and I think you're going to kind of find those things. Again, that was something we said that you're going to kind of find throughout as you go on this journey of brewing beer.
Correct. So let's see.
But I think those are some good methods, Jeff, that you brought up. I think those are some good ideas. I don't really have any questions here. I've got a lot of people watching.
Good.
If anybody has any questions or any suggestions at any time, you guys are more than welcome to call in, to write in. We appreciate talking to all of you guys. Did you have anything to add, bro?
Oh, no. What did y'all discuss already? Did y'all discuss where to get the utensils?
We did not. However, since we do have Cedric here, we'd be remiss if we didn't at least say that actually brewing seltzers can be relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, relatively inexpensive. You can also bring down that cost if you go ahead and just buy you a whole 50-pound sack of corn sugar. And a lot of times for me, I actually found myself saving myself when I came in under my gravity.
Oh.
And, sometimes you're making a 4.5% beer and you come underneath your gravity and you don't want it to be 3%. Just throw a little bit of corn sugar in there and get me right back up where I need to be.
Get you right back up where
Yeah, how
corn
much-
sugar is relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
as
How,
well.
how much is our seltzer kit?
Our seltzer kit is $17.95.
Okay. That's also a very inexpensive way to make something during this time. You can get, we have a seltzer kit that includes the flavoring. And you can get that for
It does not include a flavor.
Oh, I'm sorry, it does not include a
The
flavoring.
flavoring is $2.95, so it brings it up to $20 even. So,
No, and that's still quite a good.
That's
cost.
quite
Oh,
a good,
yeah.
for 5 gallons of seltzer,
oh yeah, and ours come out to about 5%. So, I mean,
it's pretty good.
and if
I-
you wanted to amp it up,
I had a question
Corn sugar.
from Barry Forrest here. I believe this is for you.
How much maintenance on the RO water system? Not a whole lot, actually. I mean, if anything, you've got to watch it, and we've got actually a little water meter, and I can't remember what it's called, but it measures the parts per million of solids that are in your water, and so we check it every once in a while and make sure it's still registering 0.
Okay.
And otherwise, we have to replace the filters. I think because my buddy Nick and I brew probably a couple times a month, sometimes more often, depending upon if it's competition season. And so, I mean, we actually end up changing those filters out probably about once a year. is about how often we end up changing them.
Okay, that doesn't seem too bad then.
No.
So does that eliminate the need to carbon filter, or would I still want a carbon filter after that RO? Does it remove all of that?
Removes it
chlorine?
all. So it's a multi-stage system where you have initial carbon filter, and then you have various sizes of micron filters that strip out everything.
Okay. Oh, fantastic.
So it's a great way, especially if you're building your water, which he and I build our water for every single beer that we make.
Now, I will tell you guys what you need to know is that you will need to resalt your water and do a little bit of water maintenance after that RO. You can't just use straight RO water.
No,
for
no,
beer.
no. We always build it up with minerals, gypsum, calcium carbonate, calcium chloride.
Because it's all been stripped away by that RO.
Correct. You wouldn't want to just brew with straight RO water.
Okay. Okay. Is there a good system? Maybe pointing these guys to on kind of how to learn to use RO water and how to use the salts for different styles, that sort of thing.
I can't think of it offhand right now. My brain just went ka-dunk.
That's okay. That's all right.
But perhaps another episode we can get into water and talking about water if that's something y'all are interested in. Just let us know.
I think that would be good. So.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see. It's 10:10.
Yep. I think we're probably good.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for your orders and stuff. You're keeping us busy, which we like. Hopefully this has been helpful. There's a lot of ways that you can do some money saving techniques here and there to help you to still continue to make wonderful beer, but also to perhaps help you save a dime or nickel or even $1 here or there.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again for your continued support. And as always, stay safe
Stay at home.
and brew it. Cheers.
Cheers.